Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time. Not to a grand battle or a royal court, but to a much more personal, and frankly, much weirder place, your own body. Specifically, your body as understood by an ancient Greek doctor. And let me tell you, their understanding of you is creative. If you're a woman joining us on this journey, prepare yourself. Because according to the best medical minds of the era, your most essential organ is about to go rogue. You might not even make it through the first diagnosis with your sanity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel find other curious minds like yours. Go ahead and drop me a comment to tell me what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts subtly, so subtly, in fact, that at first, you dismiss it. You're lying on your simple cot. The late afternoon sun casting long, golden stripes across the whitewashed wall of your room. You can hear the distant bleating of goats and the murmur of voices from the courtyard. It's a peaceful, ordinary day in your corner of the Hellenic world, but then you feel it again. A strange flutter, a kind of internal pressure, low in your belly, that seems to surge upwards. It's not pain, not yet. It's more like a wave of warmth and weight, a dislodging feeling that makes you hold your breath for a second before it subsides. You sit up, swinging your legs over the side of the cot. The rough-spun wool of your chiton, your simple tunic, feels a little scratchy against your skin. Maybe you just need some water. You walk to the clay amphora in the corner, your bare feet cool against the packed earth floor. As you lift the heavy jug to pour, the feeling returns, stronger this time. It's a definite upward push, a sensation that travels from your core all the way up to your chest. Your heart begins to beat a little faster, a frantic bird trapped behind your ribs. You take a sip of water, but it feels like you can't quite swallow properly. There's a lump in your throat, a phantom obstruction that wasn't there a moment ago. This is the famous globus hystericus, or the sensation of hysterical suffocation, a classic symptom that ancient physicians would have immediately recognized. For them, it was a clear signpost pointing to a single, bizarre diagnosis. You try to take a deep breath, but it catches in your chest. A wave of dizziness washes over you, and you have to place a hand against the wall to steady yourself. What is happening in the world outside your small window is still bright and serene, but inside you, a quiet chaos has begun. Your own body feels alien, unpredictable. You try to reason with yourself. Did you eat something strange at the midday meal, or are you just tired from mending the household linens all morning? But this feels different. It's not a simple stomachache. It's a deep, internal restlessness. And it's not just physical. A profound sense of anxiety, a nameless dread, is creeping in at the edges of your mind. You suddenly feel an urge to weep, for no reason at all. A moment later, a bubble of something that feels almost like laughter rises in your chest, but it dies before it can reach your lips. This baffling mix of symptoms was a hallmark of the condition. It could manifest as anything from seizures and paralysis to sudden muteness or, as you're feeling now, a bewildering emotional seesaw. You spend the rest of the afternoon in a state of quiet panic, trying to act normal, hoping no one in your family notices the slight tremor in your hands or the way you keep touching your throat. Every so often, you feel that internal surge, that mobile pressure that seems to be exploring the inside of your torso. You find yourself wondering, is this real, or is it something the spirit has done? Is it a punishment from the gods, or is your mind simply playing tricks on you? This very question is something historians and medical experts still ponder today. Were the thousands of women diagnosed with this over the centuries suffering from what we would now call panic attacks, severe anxiety disorders, or even complex forms of epilepsy or were their symptoms the physical manifestations of the immense psychological stress of living in societies that offered them so little agency? The debate over the reality of these physical symptoms versus their psychological origins is still very much alive. As dusk settles, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, you make a decision. The feeling in your throat is tighter now, and a strange coldness has seeped into your feet. Even though the evening is warm, this isn't going away. You can't live with this uncertainty. This feeling of being a stranger in your own skin. Tomorrow, you will seek help. You will find an I-8 Rose, a physician, and you will ask him what is wrong with you. You just hope he has an answer that makes sense. Little do you know, the answer you're about to receive will make no sense at all, and yet, it will shape medicine for the next 2,000 years. The decision to see a doctor brings a sliver of relief, but first, you must get through today, and today, like almost every other day of your life, is confined to the walls of the Uterus, your home. Your world is both vast in its responsibilities and incredibly small in its geography. As the sun climbs higher, you rise and begin your routine. That strange, fluttering sensation in your chest a quiet, unwelcome companion to your morning tasks. Your home is built around a central courtyard, open to the sky. This is where the life of the household happens. But your domain is primarily the Guinea Sea, the women's quarters, located on the upper floor. From its small, unglazed windows, you can sometimes catch a glimpse of the street below, or in the distance, the sun glinting off the marble of the Parthenon atop the Acropolis. It's a beautiful, but remote, view. The men of the house, your father, your brothers have already left for the agora, the marketplace, to conduct business, debate philosophy, and participate in the vibrant public life of Athens. Their world is one of noise, commerce, and ideas. Yours is one of rule, looms, and the rhythmic, quiet hum of domesticity. Your first duty is to the hearth. The fire dedicated to Hysteria, goddess of the home, must be tended. This is a sacred task, a small but constant reminder of your central role in maintaining the spiritual and physical well-being of the family. As you add a few pieces of wood, the smoke stings your eyes slightly, and you feel that familiar tightness in your throat. You swallow hard and push the feeling down. There is work to be done. The main task of the day, and indeed of most days, is weaving. In the main room of the Guinea Sea, a large upright loom stands against one wall. The vertical threads, the rope, are held taut by clay weights, and you and the other women of the household spend hours passing the shuttle back and forth, beating the weft threads into place to create the fabric that will clothe your family. The work is repetitive, almost meditative. Click-clack goes the shuttle. Thump goes the bar to tighten the weave. Today, the rhythm doesn't soothe you. With every pass of the shuttle, you feel a jolt of nervous energy. Your mind drifts. You think about the stories the men tell of Socrates questioning people in the square, of new plays being performed in the theatre of Dionysus. Those are things you only hear about, like tales from a foreign land. A small, quirky fact of your life is that olive oil is everything. It's not just for cooking. You use it to light the small clay lamps. You mix it with sand to clean your body when you bathe, and you use it as a conditioner for your hair. Your world smells perpetually of olives, wood smoke, and rule. Historians, by the way, still argue about just how strict this female seclusion was. Was it an ironclad rule, or more of an ideal promoted by male writers? Evidence suggests that women of lower classes, who couldn't afford slaves, had to go to the public fountain for water and run their errands, giving them a bit more freedom of movement. But for a woman of a respectable family like yours, to be seen wandering the streets without a specific, approved reason like a religious festival or a funeral would be a source of shame. Your virtue is tied to your invisibility. At midday, you and the other women, your mother, and aunt, perhaps a younger sister, gather for a simple meal. Barley bread, some goat cheese, figs, and water mixed with a little wine. The conversation is always the same: management of the household, slaves, the price of wool in the market, a cousin's upcoming marriage. No one mentions politics or art. It's not considered your place to discuss such things. As you eat, you find it hard to swallow the dense bread. The lump in your throat feels more real than the food. You feign a cough and take a sip of water, hoping no one has noticed. You feel a sudden, intense wave of sadness, a profound sense of being disconnected, even from the women sitting right beside you. They don't seem to feel this inner turmoil. Are you the only one? The afternoon is spent grinding grain into flour with a heavy stone, a physically demanding task that leaves your arms aching. You welcome the burn. It's a real, understandable pain. Unlike the phantom pressures moving inside you, you oversee the household stores, making sure there is enough oil, wine, and grain to last. You are the manager of this small kingdom, a queen with a realm of only a few rooms. As evening approaches, you hear the familiar sounds of the men returning. Their voices are louder, their steps heavier. They bring the dust and the energy of the outside world in with them. At the evening meal, they talk of a recent vote in the assembly, of a dispute with Sparta, of a ship that has arrived at the port of Piraeus laden with goods from Egypt. You listen in silence, serving them wine, clearing their plates. You are present, but not a participant. Later, back in the quiet of the Guinea Sea, you lie on your cot. The day is done. You have fulfilled all your duties. You are a model Athenian woman, but as the house settles into silence, the feelings return with a vengeance. The pressure surges upwards, making you gasp. Your heart hammers against your ribs, and a cold sweat breaks out on your forehead. The confinement of your day seems to have condensed into a physical pressure inside you, a force that wants to break free. Now you are certain. This is not just fatigue or worry. Something is deeply wrong. And tomorrow, you will step out of your prescribed role and see cancers from a world that usually ignores you. The morning air is surprisingly cool as you step out of the oikos. A male relative, your uncle, accompanies you, as it would be unthinkable for you to go alone. He walks a few paces ahead, a silent, grim-faced guardian, his presence both a requirement and a reminder of your protected, unrestricted status. The street is a chaotic symphony of sounds and smells. The clatter of wooden cartwheels on stone, the sharp cries of vendors hawking their wares, the braying of a stubborn donkey. The air is thick with the scent of baking bread, dust, and something vaguely fishy wafting up from the direction of the agora. For you, this is a sensory overload. The world outside your home is loud and overwhelming, and it makes the quiet turmoil inside you feel even more acute. You arrive at the physician's practice, which isn't a grand building but a modest room in a larger house, barely distinguishable from any other. This is typical. Many Greek doctors, saw patients in their own homes or traveled to the homes of the wealthy. Inside, the light is dim. The room smells of dried herbs and something metallic that you can't quite place. A few simple wooden stools are scattered about, and on a low table, you see a collection of bronze and iron tools that look vaguely menacing. There are probes, scalpels, and forceps, all looking in a vingram clean but brutally functional. The physician, an older man with a calm, serious face and a neatly trimmed beard, gestures for you to sit. He is a follower of the famous Hippocrates, of course, which is supposed to be reassuring. It means he rejects supernatural explanations for illness. He won't blame a mischievous god or an angry spirit for your condition. He believes your ailment has a natural, physical cause. This is a revolutionary idea for the time, the very foundation of Western medicine. Your uncle does all the talking at first. He describes your episodes in vague, slightly embarrassed terms, your moments of breathlessness, your emotional outbursts, your complaints of oppression moving within you. The doctor listens patiently, his eyes fixed on you. He nods, his expression unreadable. When your uncle finishes, the doctor turns his full attention to you. His gaze is not unkind, but it is intensely analytical. "And you," he says, his voice even, "tell me where you feel this disturbance." Finding your voice is difficult. The lump in your throat seems to have swollen with anxiety. You speak in a low murmur, describing the sensation of something rising, the feeling of being choked from the inside. You mention the dizziness, the sudden waves of sadness, the coldness in your limbs. As you speak, you feel a flush of shame. These symptoms sound so strange, so intangible. You half expect him to dismiss you, to say it's just a woman's fancy. But he doesn't. He listens intently to every word. When you're finished, he is silent for a long moment, stroking his beard in thought. He doesn't touch you. A direct physical examination of a respectable woman by a male doctor was often considered improper. He relies almost entirely on your account and his observations of your general appearance. He might ask a few questions that seem bizarre to you. Are you a widow? Are you unmarried? His questions aren't about your happiness, but about your marital and reproductive status. To you, it feels invasive and irrelevant. To him, it's the most important diagnostic clue of all. Finally, he leans back slightly and delivers his diagnosis. He uses a word you have heard whispered, but never fully understood: hysteria. He says it with an air of absolute certainty, as if he were identifying a simple fracture. Hysteria. The word itself sounds strange on his tongue. He explains that it comes from the Greek word hysteria, which means uterus. This is the moment, the pivotal, world-changing, and utterly bonkers diagnosis. He tells you that your ailment, all of it, the choking, the anxiety, the dizziness, the sadness, is being caused by your own womb. He explains, in a common rational tone, that your uterus has become dislodged from its proper place in your pelvis. It has become light and dry, and is now wandering around inside your body cavity in search of moisture. You just stare at him. What your hysteria is, wondering. You try to picture it. An organ, your most intimate and female part, has somehow untethered itself and is now on an internal road trip. According to him, the lump you feel in your throat is, quite literally, your uterus, which has traveled up through your torso and is now pressing against your windpipe. This is where a little known, but fascinating, part of the diagnostic process might come in. To confirm his suspicion, the doctor might perform a smell test, but not on you. He might ask your husband or father to check the scent of your breath. Ancient medical texts, like the Hippocratic Corpus, suggest that in cases of a wandering womb, a woman's breath might take on a strange or foul odor, which was believed to be a direct result of the displaced organ's exhalations traveling up the body. The idea that a man smelling your breath could confirm a gynecological condition is one of those historical details that is both medically absurd and deeply revealing about the social dynamics of the time. The doctor sees the utter disbelief on your face. He reassures you that this is a well-documented condition, common in women, especially those who are unmarried or widowed and thus not fulfilling their primary function. Historians are still debating how much the average Greek woman actually believed this diagnosis versus how much she simply had to accept it, having no other framework to understand her own body or her very real suffering. Don't you, sitting on that stool, think, yes, that makes perfect sense? Or did a small, rebellious part of your mind scream, this is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard? We can never know. But for now, this is your reality. You have a name for your illness, hysteria, and it's not a spirit or a curse. It's just your own body, betraying you in the most spectacular way imaginable. The word hysteria hangs in the air of the small, herb-scented room. It's a label, a box to put all your confusing experiences into. But it's a very, very strange box. You're still trying to wrap your head around the core concept. Your womb has gone for a stroll. As the doctor begins to explain the theory behind it, you start to realize this isn't just his personal pet theory. This is mainstream medical science. This is the cutting edge of 4th century BCE gynecology. He explains that the hysteria is not like the other organs. The heart, the lungs, the liver, they are stable, predictable, but the womb, he says, is different. He describes it as being like a small creature, an animal within animals. This isn't just a flowery metaphor to many ancient thinkers. It was a literal belief. They imagined the uterus as having its own desires, its own agency, and a distinct mobility that no other part of the body possessed. The primary cause of its restlessness, he continues, is a lack of moisture. A dry womb is an unhappy womb. The most effective way to keep it moist and weighted down is through sexual intercourse and, ultimately, pregnancy. The process of conception and carrying a child was seen as the organ's natural purpose and the thing that kept it contentedly in its place. Therefore, he reasons, this condition is most common in virgins, widows, and women who have been celibate for a long time. Their wombs become arid, light, and begin to wander in search of the moisture they crave. You try to visualize the anatomy HES describing. Your knowledge of your own insides is a complete mystery. A blank map. It's not like you've ever seen an anatomical drawing. All you have are the words of this man, who speaks with such authority. He describes your torso as a large, open cavity through which this organ can freely travel. He doesn't seem to be aware of all the other things in there, the intestines, the ligaments, the membranes that hold everything in place. To him, it's a clear shot from your pelvis to your throat. And the symptoms, they all neatly fit his theory. If the womb rises and presses against your diaphragm, you feel short of breath. If it bumps into your heart, you get palpitations and anxiety. If it gets all the way up to your throat, you feel that choking sensation, the globus hystericus. If it veers left or right and compresses the blood vessels leading to your limbs, you might experience numbness or a strange coldness. If it travels upwards and pushes against your head, it can cause dizziness, seizures, or even temporary madness. It is the ultimate unified field theory of your ailments, one single cause for 1,000 different symptoms. This is the core of the mainstream historical knowledge about hysteria. But here's a weirder, less discussed aspect of the belief. Some ancient texts suggest the womb had a sense of smell. Yes, they believed your uterus could smell. This wasn't just a passive organ being pushed around by bodily humors, it was an active agent, drawn to pleasant aromas and repelled by foul ones. This belief would become the cornerstone of its treatment, a bizarre form of internal aromatherapy. The idea was that you could literally lure the wandering womb back to its proper home, like a lost pet, using the right scents. The doctor continues his explanation, seemingly untroubled by the fantastical nature of it all. He speaks of the sympathy between the womb and the rest of the body, a concept that allowed for this kind of action at a distance. It was all part of a larger medical framework involving the balance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A dry womb was a sign of a humoral imbalance, a body out of harmony with itself. It's important to remember that for all its absurdity, this theory was not born from malice. It was a genuine attempt by early physicians to explain a very real and distressing set of symptoms in women, using the best science available to them. They were working without modern tools, without an understanding of microbiology, endocrinology, or neurology. In a world where so much was explained by the whims of the gods, this natural explanation was a huge leap forward, a deeply flawed, misogynistic, and frankly hilarious leap, but a leap nonetheless. Historians are still debating the precise origins of this idea. Was it inherited from even older Egyptian medical beliefs, which also contain references to a wandering or rising uterus, or was it uniquely Greek invention, born from a combination of nascent anatomical observation and deep-seated cultural anxieties about female nature? The papiers Ebers the Kohan gynecological papiers from ancient Egypt, dating back more than 1,000 years before Hippocrates, described fumigating a woman's body or vagina with pleasant-smelling substances to treat a condition that sounds remarkably similar. It seems the idea of a mobile womb was an ancient one. which the Greeks then codified and expanded into a full-blown medical doctrine. As you sit there, you are being indoctrinated into this ancient belief system. Your suffering is being filtered through this strange and powerful lens. You are no longer just a person who feels unwell, you are a hysteric. You are the battleground for a conflict between your body's natural purpose and its current unnatural state. The diagnosis is complete. Now, the doctor says, leaning forward with a renewed sense of purpose. It's time to talk about the cure. It's time to coax that little animal back home. Now the focus shifts from diagnosis to the man whose name gives it all a veneer of unassailable authority, Hippocrates. The doctor mentions him by name, perhaps puffing his chest out just a little. The great Hippocrates himself wrote extensively on this. He might say, to you. Hippocrates, of course, is a legendary figure, almost a demigod of healing. The idea that this titan of medicine personally considered your very problem lends a strange, paradoxical comfort. It normalizes your bizarre condition. You're not just some random woman with a roving organ, you're a classic case study. The doctor pulls a scroll from a nearby shelf. It's a copy of one of the treatises from the Hippocratic corpus, the collection of medical texts associated with the master and his school. He doesn't read from it directly. Literacy is a rare skill, and HES more interested in paraphrasing, but the prop itself is powerful. It represents tradition, knowledge, and proof. Hippocrates teaches us. The doctor begins, adopting a professorial tone, that the womb is the origin of all manner of diseases in women. He explains the Hippocratic view in more detail. In treatises like On the Diseases of Women, the theory is laid out plain and simple. Your womb, when it's not anchored by a growing fetus, is prone to drying out. When it becomes dry, it also becomes light, and like a dry cork in water, it floats upwards. It's a simple, elegant mechanical model, based on the physics of the day. He explains that your womb is traveling, searching for the vital fluids it lacks. It gravitates towards the moister organs of the body, the liver, the heart, the brain, in a desperate attempt to rehydrate itself. It is like a parched field craving rain, he says, using a classic Greek agricultural metaphor you can easily understand. This journey is what causes all the trouble. When it presses against the liver, it disrupts the flow of bile. When it ascends to the head, it can trigger what the Hippocratic texts call hysterical apoplexy, a state resembling a stroke or a severe epileptic seizure. Here's where we get a more nuanced, and slightly less known, detail about the Hippocratic view. While the primary cause was a dry womb, they also believed that a sudden shock or strong emotion could dislodge it. They fright, a period of intense grief, or even a fit of anger could, in their view, be enough to send the uterus off its moorings. This is one of the earliest documented links between emotional states and physical symptoms in Western medicine. So, while they saw it as a physical problem, a mobile organ, they acknowledged that a non-physical event and emotion could be the trigger. It's a fascinating, if flawed, step towards a psychosomatic understanding of illness. The doctor might then offer a Hippocratic aphorism, something short and memorable for a woman. To be a woman is to be sick. This sounds horribly bleak, but to him, it's just a statement of biological fact. HES not being intentionally cruel, HES articulating a core belief of his medical tradition that the female body, because of its complex and mysterious reproductive system, is inherently less stable and more prone to disease than the male body. The male body was the default, the perfect standard. Yours was a deviation from that standard. Now for the academic debate. While the Hippocratic corpus is vast, scholars have spent centuries arguing over which of the 70 or so texts were actually written by Hippocrates himself. Many were likely penned by his students or followers, sometimes over several generations. So when your doctor says, Hippocrates teaches us, is he quoting the man himself, or a physician from a century later who was simply writing under the umbrella of the famous brand, for example? The idea of the womb as a separate animal is more prominent in Plato's writing than in many of the core Hippocratic texts, which tend to favor more mechanistic explanations. The lines are blurry. and historians continue to debate which specific ideas came from which specific minds. It was more of a shared intellectual universe than a single, unified doctrine. You, of course, know none of this. You just hear the name Hippocrates and nod. The doctor, satisfied that he has established the theoretical foundation, now moves to the practical application of this knowledge, based on the teachings of the master. He says, we have a clear path for treatment. He explains that the strategy is twofold. First, they must drive the uterus down from wherever it has lodged itself. Second, they must detain it in its proper place to prevent it from wandering again. He looks at you with a newfound optimism. The mystery is solved. The great Hippocrates has provided the map. Now all that's left is to follow it. The solutions he's about to propose are a direct, logical extension of the diagnosis. If the womb is traveled up, they must lure it back down. If it's dry, they must moisten it. If it's empty, they must fill it. It all makes a strange kind of sense within its own bubble of logic. You find yourself caught in that bubble, unwitting, if bewildered, patient. The authority of the long-dead father of medicine is a powerful anesthetic, numbing the part of your brain that wants to scream that this is all completely insane. You are about to become a living experiment in Hippocratic theory. So the doctor says, leaning forward as if sharing a great secret, why does it wonder I have told you it is dry and light? But what makes it so? He doesn't wait for you to answer. The question is purely rhetorical, a way to structure his lecture. It is idle, he declares. An empty womb is a restless womb. This is the absolute core of the issue, the social and medical belief that underpins the entire diagnosis. Your uterus, in his worldview, has a purpose, a telos, as the philosophers would say. Its function is to conceive and bear children. When it is not engaged in this work, it becomes bored, unemployed, and, like an unoccupied person in the agora who might get into arguments or cause a scene, your unemployed womb starts to stir. He elaborates on this idea of uterine thirst. He paints a vivid picture for you. Imagine your body is a landscape. The womb is supposed to be in the fertile, well-irrigated valley of your pelvis. But in its current, childless state, your valley has become a desert. The organ, parched and desperate, begins to migrate, seeking the moisture that is naturally abundant in other parts of the body. It's drawn upwards towards the lush, wet lands of the liver, lungs, and heart. This explanation is profoundly revealing. It's not just a medical theory, it's a social one. It medicalizes a woman's social role. Your biological health is being explicitly and directly tied to your fulfillment of a specific domestic duty, procreation. By not being pregnant or not having regular intercourse, you are, from a medical standpoint, failing to maintain your own body. The blame for the illness subtly shifts onto you and your lifestyle, or more accurately, your lack of a certain kind of lifestyle. The doctor might then ask about your menstrual cycle, as this was also seen as a key factor. Hippocratic theory held that menstrual blood was a form of excess fluid that needed to be purged. If this process was somehow blocked or insufficient, the retained blood could turn into toxic vapors that would put pressure on the womb and encourage it to move. So a healthy menstrual cycle was also seen as a way of keeping the womb stable. Now for a truly strange and less discussed belief connected to this uterine thirst. Some ancient physicians believed that the substance the womb was really after was male semen. This wasn't just about the act of intercourse moistening the organ, it was about the specific properties of the semen itself. They considered it to be a potent, life-giving, and intensely wet substance, the ultimate cure for a dry womb. In their view, the uterus literally craved it. This belief adds another layer to the theory, making it not just about pregnancy, but about the necessity of regular sexual contact with a male to maintain female health. It framed celibacy not as a choice or a circumstance, but as a direct cause of physical disease. Historians and classicists still argue about how much this was a purely medical idea versus a tool for social control. Was this theory so popular and long-lasting because it provided a scientific justification for encouraging women to marry young, remain in their marriages, and produce heirs? It's impossible to prove intent, but the effect is undeniable. The diagnosis of the wandering womb created a powerful incentive for women to conform to the social expectations of ancient Greek society. If you deviated from the norm by being widowed, unmarried, or even just in a marriage that was not physically intimate, any subsequent physical or emotional distress could be neatly explained and packaged as hysteria. Your body itself was pathologized for not being in use. The doctor, unaware of the 500 years of feminist critique that will one day be leveled against his logic, continues his confident explanation. The womb is like the earth, he might say, returning to his agricultural metaphors. If left fallow, it becomes hard and cracked. It must be plowed and seeded to remain soft and fertile. The imagery is potent and clear. You are the field. Your husband is the farmer, and your womb is the restless soil. He looks at you, a hint of pity in his eyes. You are not fulfilling your nature, and so, your nature is rebelling. The logic is circular and inescapable. Why are you sick? Because your womb is wandering. Why is your womb wandering? Because it is empty and dry. Why is it empty and dry? Because you are not fulfilling your biological purpose. Therefore, your sickness is a direct consequence of your social and physical state. The diagnosis has now become a judgment, but the doctor sees it as a compassionate one. He isn't blaming you maliciously, he is simply explaining the natural order of things. He has identified the root cause of the problem, and with the cause so clearly defined, the solutions become self-evident. They must find a way to quench your womb's thirst and give it a reason to stay put. The treatment plan is about to get very, very practical, and very, very strained. Having established why your uterus is on its unauthorized tour, the doctor moves on to the first, and most gentle, phase of treatment, luring it back down. We must coax it, he says, his voice softening. We do not want to frighten it further. We must entice it back to its home. This is where the peculiar idea of a sensitive womb comes into play. The strategy is simple: apply pleasant smells to the lower half of your body and foul smells to the upper half. The first step is the sweet stuff. The doctor, or more likely an assistant or a member of your own family following his instructions, will prepare a series of fragrant applications. The womb, he explains, delights in sweet aromas. We will place these scents below, so that it will be drawn downwards, wishing to be closer to them. You are taken to a room and asked to lie down. The first treatment is a fumigation. An incense burner is brought in, filled with sweet-smelling resins like frankincense or myrrh, or fragrant woods like sandalwood. This isn't for the ambience. The burner is placed under the couch you are lying on, or you are made to sit on a special stool with a hole in the seat, so the fragrant smoke wafts directly upwards. You lie there, enveloped in a thick, sweet, perfumed cloud, while the doctor calmly explains that the scent molecules are traveling through your body to your uterus, whispering, "Come back down. It's nice down here." Next come the lotions and pessaries. The doctor prescribes a series of oils and unguents, all heavily scented. Think of it as ancient Greek aromatherapy, but with a very specific and very mobile target. You might be given a lotion made from rose oil or jasmine to massage into your abdomen and thighs. The gentle pressure of the massage is also thought to help guide the organ downwards. Then there are the pessaries. These were small plugs of wool or linen, soaked in a fragrant concoction and inserted into your vagina. The recipe for this concoction could vary. A common one might involve honey, which was valued for its sweetness and texture, mixed with sweet wine and the oil of lilies or saffron. The idea was to create an irresistible olfactory welcome mat right at the front door of the womb's proper home. You are essentially trying to perfume your way back to health, to seduce a rogue organ with the power of potpourri. Here's a buzz-on little tidbit about these fragrant ingredients. Some of them were incredibly expensive. Frankincense and myrrh were imported from Arabia and Africa, and saffron was That is now one of the most precious spices in the world. This meant that the quality of your sweet smell therapy was directly related to your wealth. A rich woman might get to lure her womb back with exotic, imported perfumes, while a poorer woman might have to make do with locally grown herbs like mint or chamalem. It's a strange form of class-based medicine, where the efficacy of your treatment could depend on your family's trade connections. While you are being perfumed from below, the doctor might also address your diet. You would be prescribed moistening foods, things like melons, cucumbers, barley soup, and fish were considered wet and good for you. You would be told to avoid dry foods like lentils or certain types of meat. You are to drink plenty of water and milk. The goal is to rehydrate your entire system, hoping that some of that moisture will eventually make its way to your parched uterus. The whole experience is surreal. You're lying there, feeling dizzy and anxious, with a lump in your throat, and the proposed solution is to make your nether regions smell like a flower garden. It's a testament to the power of medical authority that you go along with it. You desperately want to feel better, and this man of science has a plan. So you breathe in the sweet smoke. You allow the fragrant oils to be applied, and you hope. Historians often debate the patient's perspective in all this. While the theory is absurd to us, was the treatment itself entirely without effect? Probably not. The process was calming, being cared for, being touched gently during the massages, the soothing effects of the warm smoke and pleasant smells. All of this could have had a powerful placebo effect for someone suffering from what we would likely call anxiety or panic disorder. This kind of ritualized, common treatment could genuinely reduce stress and temporarily alleviate symptoms. The reason it worked might have had nothing to do with a traveling womb and everything to do with simple human care and sensory comfort. But for the doctor, the mechanism is clear. He is patiently waiting for your uterus to smell the sweet invitation. He might check in on you periodically, asking if you feel the pressure in your chest or throat lessening. If you say yes, even a little, it's a sign of success. The womb is descending. It's slowly, cautiously, making its way back from its journey to your head. Drawn by the irresistible allure of honey-soaked wool and frankincense-laced smoke. If the sweet smells work, the treatment is a success. But if they don't, if your symptoms persist, the doctor has another trick up his sleeve. And it's not nearly as pleasant. The sweet perfumes have failed. You've spent days surrounded by the scents of roses and myrrh. You've been fumigated with fragrant smoke until your hair and clothes are permanently scented. But the lump in your throat remains. The pressure in your chest still comes and goes, and the waves of anxiety have not subsided. The doctor, far from being discouraged, simply nods. This is a stubborn case. The womb is not just thirsty, it's recalcitrant. It seems, he says gravely, that the gentle invitation has been ignored. No, we must make its current location inhospitable. If the carrot doesn't work, it's time for the stick. And in this case, the stick is a truly epic amount of stink. The logic is the inverse of the previous treatment. If sweet smells applied below can lure the womb downwards, then foul smells applied above should drive it from its perch near your head and chest. It's time to weaponize the odor. The doctor now prescribes a course of malodorous therapy. You thought the last treatment was strange. You are about to enter a whole new world of olfactory unpleasantness. First, you are instructed to smell things, but not just any things. The most putrid, so unacrid substances the ancient world can muster. The doctor might present you with a piece of wool soaked in bitumen and naturally occurring tar and hold it under your nose. The sharp, petroleum-like stench is dizzying. He tells you to inhale deeply. The goal is to make the air in the top half of your body so disgusting that your womb will flee in horror. If tar isn't doing the trick, they have other options. Burning feathers or hair produces a uniquely awful, choking smell. You might be forced to inhale the smoke from a smoldering pile of feathers. Another popular choice was asafoetida, a plant resin from the Middle East. If you've ever smelled it, you know it's pungent, sulfurous odor. like a mix of garlic and onions left to rot. It's so potent it was nicknamed devil's dung. You would have this held under your nose, or even have a paste of it smeared on your nostrils. But the piece de resistance of this foul-smelling arsenal was often cussed or This was a secretion from the scent glands of a beaver, located near its nether regions. It has a strong, animalistic, musky odor that was considered deeply unpleasant when raw. You would be made to smell this glandular secretion, the doctor watching you closely for any sign that the treatment was working, which, in this case, meant any sign that the lump in your throat was descending as your uterus presumably recoiled from the beaver scent assault. This is a good moment to appreciate a truly weird historical irony. That same colostrum, when properly aged and diluted, was also used in perfumery and even as a food additive. It's approved by the FDA today as natural flavoring, often through vanilla or raspberry notes. So, depending on the preparation, the same substance could be used as either a foul repellent or a pleasant lure. This fact was likely lost on you as you were being subjected to its raw, unadulterated stench. While this assault on your nostrils is happening, the fumigation has continued, but now with a foul purpose. Instead of sweet woods, the burner under your chair might be filled with substances designed to create a repulsive smoke, and the pleasant-smelling pest areas they are replaced. You might be prescribed a new vaginal suppository, this time made with something neutral or even slightly unpleasant, to ensure there's nothing attractive left down below. Let's pause to consider the sheer theatricality of this. You are sitting in a room. A doctor is holding a lump of tar under your nose. Someone is burning a pile of chicken feathers in the corner. And you have the lingering scent of beaver butt in your memory. It's an assault on the senses. It's hard to imagine how this could possibly be coming. In fact, for someone already suffering from anxiety, it might induce a full-blown panic attack. And this leads to another one of those historical debates. Some scholars suggest that the success of this treatment might have been due to its sheer shock value. The experience was so unpleasant, so jarring, that it could provoke a strong physiological reaction, gasping, huffing, even vomiting that might physically change the patient's breathing patterns or muscle tension, thus relieving the sensation of a lump in the throat. In other words, you might feel better simply because the aggressive treatment shocked your body out of its anxious state. The doctor would see this as proof that the womb was fleeing the stench. The reality might be far more complex. A mixture of physiological shock and the powerful psychological effect of undergoing such an extreme ritual. The doctor, meanwhile, is observing you with the cool, detached eye of a scientist. Do you feel it moving, he asks. Is the pressure lessening on, perhaps, through the haze of smoke and stench? You do feel a change, or perhaps you just say you do, because you desperately want this particular phase of the treatment to be over. You nod weakly, and the doctor smiles. Success. The combination of the sweet lure from below and the foul threat from above has worked. Your wandering womb has been successfully terrified back into its proper place. The immediate crisis is over. But the work isn't done. Now they have to make sure it stays there. Just when you think you've heard the most outlandish theories your doctor can offer, he brings in a heavyweight from another field entirely. The great philosopher Plato, he says, with the same reverence he used for Hippocrates, wrote about this very matter in his Timaeus. The fact that a philosopher, not a physician, is being cited as an expert on your anatomy doesn't seem to strike him as odd at all. In the ancient world, the lines between medicine, philosophy, and natural science were beautifully, and sometimes dangerously, blurred. The doctor explains Plato's view, which takes the idea of an independent womb and elevates it to a whole new level of poetic absurdity. Plato didn't just see the womb as a wandering organ, he described it as a living creature, inedible, in his famous dialogue, the Timaeus. Plato writes, and your doctor paraphrases with enthusiasm, in women, the organ which is called the matrix or womb is a living creature within them which longs to bear children. You let that sink in. A living creature, inedible, dwelling inside you, with its own desires and frustrations. Plato's imagery is far more vivid and anthropomorphic than the more mechanical Hippocratic model. According to Plato, if this creature remains barren for too long after puberty, it becomes distressed and angry. It gets indignant, and in its indignation, it breaks loose and begins to wander throughout the body. The philosopher's description is strikingly dramatic. He says this wandering animal blocks up the passages of the breath, which sounds exactly like your choking sensation. It brings the body into the uttermost distress and engenders all manner of diseases. Plato's theory gave a personality to your problem. You're not just dealing with a misplaced bit of anatomy, you're dealing with a frustrated, internal pet. This framing of the womb as a separate, desire-driven animal is a critical piece of the puzzle. It helps explain why the cures were so focused on appeasement and enticement. You don't reason with a grumpy animal, you placate it. You offer it treats, sweet smells, or you scare it with loud noises, foul smells. Plato's philosophy provided a powerful, metaphorical language that made the entire bizarre medical practice feel more intuitive. Here we encounter a fascinating, and often overlooked, little detail in Plato's thinking. He wasn't only talking about women. In the very same passage of the Timaeus, he also describes a parallel condition in men. He wrote that the nature of the genital organs in men is similarly disobedient and self-willed, like a creature that is deaf to reason, and that when its desires are frustrated, it tries to gain the mastery and can cause all sorts of problems. So, while the wandering womb theory is the most famous example of misogynistic medicine, Plato, at least, saw reproductive frustration as a potentially destabilizing force for both sexes. This male equivalent, however, never quite captured the medical imagination in the same way and certainly didn't spawn a 2,000-year-long diagnostic tradition. History, it seems, found the idea of a female body in rebellion far more compelling. The doctor, of course, probably skips the part about men. His focus is on you. The introduction of Plato into the consultation is significant. It elevates your condition from a mere physical ailment to a problem of cosmic and philosophical importance. The Timaeus is a work about the creation of the universe and the nature of humanity. By placing your illness within that context, the doctor is saying that your personal struggle reflects a deeper truth about the natural order. A woman's purpose, in this order, is to procreate. When that purpose is thwarted, the very creature designed to fulfill it rebels. Your body is a microcosm of a universal principle. This is another point of scholarly contention. How much did the philosophical ideas of Plato actually influence the day-to-day practices of a working Uterus? Did doctors read Plato and change their treatments? Or did Plato simply articulate a pre-existing folk belief in a more sophisticated way? The consensus among many historians is that it was likely a feedback loop. Medical ideas influenced philosophers, and philosophical concepts, in turn, gave doctors a more elaborate and high-minded way to explain their theories to patients. They reinforced each other, creating a cultural and intellectual climate where the idea of a wandering womb seemed not just plausible, but profound. Your doctor certainly thinks it's profound. He uses Plato's animal within an animal analogy to reinforce his previous points. You see, he might say triumphantly, the philosophers agree, the creature must be pacified, and the only thing that will truly and permanently pacify it is to give it what it desires. The conversation has taken a distinct turn. It started with a physical diagnosis, a dry organ, moved to a sensory treatment, smells, and has now landed on a philosophical justification, a frustrated animal. All three paths are converging on a single, inescapable conclusion. The fumigation-esque and foul odors were just temporary fixes, like patching a leaky roof. Now, the doctor is ready to talk about the permanent solution. It's time to address the root cause. It's time to talk about how to tame the beast within. All the theories have been laid out, the temporary measures attempted. The sweet smells and the foul stenches were just the opening act. Now, the doctor gets to the heart of the matter. The treatment he considers to be the definitive, long-term cure. He looks at you with the simple clarity of a man who believes he holds the ultimate answer. The most effective and lasting treatment, he states, is marriage and pregnancy. The womb must be given its work. This is it, the ultimate prescription. It's not a potion, not a poultice, but a complete reorientation of your life. He explains that all the other therapies are merely palliative. They can guide the womb back home, but they can't keep it there. Only by fulfilling its natural function can the organ be properly anchored in place. The logic, from his perspective, is flawless. The primary cause of the wandering was the womb's dry and light state. Regular intercourse, he explains, provides the necessary moisture. The act itself was seen as a therapeutic, humidifying process. It would soothe the parched organ and begin to weigh it down. This is the first step of the cure. If you are unmarried, the prescription is simple: get a husband. If you are married but celibate, the prescription is a conversation with your husband. If you are a widow, the prescription is to remarry as quickly as possible. But intercourse is just the preventative maintenance. The real cure, the one that truly fixes the problem, is pregnancy. When the womb conceives, it begins to fill. As the fetus grows, the organ becomes heavier and heavier, making it physically impossible for it to wander. Furthermore, the process of pregnancy was believed to fundamentally change the womb's nature, making it satisfied and content. It has found its telos, its purpose. The animal has been fed, and now it will rest. The doctor might cite Hippocrates again, who famously and perhaps apocryphally wrote, "I have taught you how to recognize them. Now I will teach you how to cure them. Marry them to a man. If they are seized by the hysterical suffocation, you will find that they are cured by pregnancy. It's medicine at its most prescriptive, blending social engineering with physiological theory. Let's unpack a very specific and radical part of this belief. Some medical writers of the period, like the later Roman physician Soranus, who was actually more skeptical of the wandering womb theory, but still reflects the thinking of the time, discussed how to time this cure. They might advise that a woman suffering from hysteria should try to conceive at a specific point in her menstrual cycle, believing it would be more effective. There were even debates about whether the gender of the child could have an impact. The details were intricate. A whole science built around this core concept of the procreative cure. This prescription, of course, had profound implications for your life. It wasn't like being told to take an herb 3 times a day. It was a life sentence, of a sort. Your health and well-being were now officially dependent on your marital and reproductive status. This gave immense power to the men in your life: your father, who arranged your marriage, and your husband, who was now not just your partner but your physician, the dispenser of the cure. Any personal desires you might have had to remain single, to pursue other interests as limited as they were, or to simply not have children were now medically invalidated. To choose such a path was to choose illness. Historians are still untangling the complex web of motivations here. It's too simple to say it was all a conspiracy to keep women in their place. For many ancient doctors, this was sound medical advice based on the best evidence they had. They saw a correlation: unmarried and widowed women seemed to report these symptoms more often. They didn't have the tools to see the underlying causes: the immense stress, lack of social outlet, and powerlessness that might come with those states. Instead, they saw a simple biological equation: no husband, no baby, equals sickness. The correlation was real, their causation was wrong. This is a classic trap that medicine has fallen into time and time again throughout history. For you, sitting in that room, the prescription is both terrifying and, in a strange way, a relief. It's a clear path forward. The ambiguity of your illness is gone. The steps are laid out. Find a man. Get married. Have a child. Your family, who may have been worried and confused by your ailment, now has a concrete plan of action. Your uncle, who brought you here, nods in grim approval. This makes sense to him. It fits his understanding of the world and a woman's place in it. The doctor has concluded his consultation. He has diagnosed you with a wandering womb, caused by an unfulfilled biological drive, and has prescribed the only permanent cure. As you leave his practice and step back into the bright, chaotic street, the world looks different. Your own future now seems like a medical necessity. You are not just a person, you are a patient, and your treatment plan is about to begin. Not in an infirmary, but in the heart of your social and family life. Your body is no longer entirely your own, it's a vessel whose health is now a matter of public and private concern, to be managed and maintained by the rites of marriage and motherhood. While the male I-8 rose and his philosophical justifications dominate the official medical records of the time, there was another, often silent, group of practitioners who dealt with women's bodies far more intimately, the midwives. As you return home, your mind swirling with the doctor's grand theories, your mother or an older female relative might pull you aside. She has her own ideas, her own traditions, passed down not through scrolls and formal teaching, but through generations of women. The world of the midwife was a world of practical, hands-on knowledge. They were the ones present at births, the ones who dealt with miscarriages, and the ones women turned to for all manner of female troubles. They might not have used the fancy term hysteria, but they were certainly familiar with the symptoms you described. They had seen it all before: the breathlessness, the anxiety, the strange pains, but their understanding of it was often more grounded and less fantastical. Your mother might listen to the doctor's diagnosis with a skeptical frown. A wandering womb-animal longing for children, it might sound a bit dramatic to her. A midwife's approach was typically less about cosmic purpose and more about immediate, physical comfort. She might not have a unified theory for your condition, but she had a collection of remedies. She might suggest a special herbal tea, not to lure an organ, but simply to calm your nerves. A blend of chamomile and lemon balm, perhaps, known for its soothing properties. She might recommend a warm bath infused with lavender. These were not cures for a roving uterus, but simple, effective ways to manage stress and physical tension. The focus was on making you feel better, right now, rather than on fixing your fundamental nature. This is where the historical record gets tricky and fascinating. The knowledge of these midwives was almost entirely oral. It wasn't written down in prestigious medical texts. What we know about them often comes from the writings of the male physicians themselves, who sometimes dismissed them as ignorant charlatans, and other times grudgingly admitted their skill in certain areas. Soranus of Ephesus, a Roman physician who wrote an extensive treatise on gynecology, actually showed a great deal of respect for the ideal midwife, outlining the qualities she should possess: literate, hardworking, and of good character, with a deep knowledge of her craft. One of the most interesting, and less known, aspects of the midwife's practice was their use of massage. While the doctor might prescribe a gentle rubbing with scented oils to guide the womb, a midwife might employ a much more direct and, frankly, more anatomically sensible form of massage. Some sources suggest that midwives would perform specific abdominal massages designed to relieve bloating, cramping, and muscle tension, which could have been the real source of some of the pressure you were feeling. They understood the landscape of the female abdomen in a practical way that a male doctor, who was forbidden from touching his patients so intimately, never could. There was also a potential for a bizarre and controversial treatment that existed in this grey area between official medicine and folk practice. Some interpretations of ancient texts suggest that midwives might have performed a form of digital manipulation or uterine massage, essentially a manual stimulation intended to bring about a hysterical paroxysm, or what we would now understand as an orgasm. The theory, as later articulated more clearly by physicians like Galen, was that this paroxysm would release pent-up humors or vapors, providing immediate relief from the symptoms. This is, to be clear, a highly debated topic among historians. Was this a common practice? Was it seen as medical or something else? The evidence is scant and open to interpretation. But it represents a completely different approach, one that sought to provide a physical release for a physical tension. Bypassing the need for marriage and pregnancy entirely, it was a purely mechanical solution, divorced from the social and moral prescriptions of the male doctors. Your mother or a local midwife wouldn't have explained it in those clinical terms. For her, It was just another tool in her toolkit, a technique that she knew, from experience, sometimes worked when nothing else would. Her advice would be whispered, woman to woman, in the privacy of the Guinea Sea. It was practical, sometimes messy, and deeply rooted in a female tradition of knowledge about female bodies. So now you are caught between two worlds of medicine. On one hand, you have the official, scientific diagnosis from the male physician. It's a grand, sweeping theory involving wandering animals, cosmic purpose, and the prescription of a specific social role. It has the weight of philosophy and formal learning behind it. On the other hand, you have the quiet, practical wisdom of the women around you. Their remedies are less dramatic herbal teas, warm baths, specific massages. They offer immediate comfort rather than a grand cure. They treat your symptoms rather than your soul. For you, this might be a source of confusion. Who do you believe, the man with the scrolls and the big words, or the woman with the knowledgeable hands and the soothing voice? In all likelihood, you would probably end up trying a bit of both. You might drink your mother's common tea in the evening, while your family begins the serious business of arranging a marriage, as prescribed by the doctor. You are navigating the complex medical marketplace of the ancient world, where official science and folk wisdom existed side by side, sometimes in conflict, sometimes in quiet collaboration, and in the middle of it all is you, just trying to find a way to feel normal in a body you've been told is anything but. While the grand, life-altering prescription of marriage is being considered, the doctor has also given you a list of more immediate, tangible treatments. The smells were just phase 1 of the active intervention. Phase 2 involves things you have to swallow or smear on your body. You are about to discover the strange and sometimes unappetizing world of ancient Greek pharmacology. The doctor, or his assistant, hands your uncle a small clay pot containing a dark, thick paste. This, you are told, is a plaster to be applied to your abdomen. The recipe is a closely guarded secret of the physician's school, but it likely contains a mixture of herbs, minerals, and a base of raw fat or beeswax. The purpose of this gauillot, or cotoplasma, is twofold. Firstly, it's a vehicle for moistening agents. It might contain olive oil or other plant-based fats that are supposed to seep through your skin and provide hydration directly to your misbehaving uterus. Secondly, and more strangely, the plaster might contain ingredients designed to have a weighting effect. This is where the line between medicine and sympathetic magic gets incredibly blurry. Some formulas described in ancient texts called for the inclusion of heavy substances, not because of their chemical properties, but because of their intrinsic quality of heaviness. For example, a plaster might contain powdered lead. The idea wasn't that the lead would be absorbed in any significant way, but that its essential weightiness would be magically or sympathetically transferred to your light, flighty womb, helping to hold it down. You are essentially trying to treat a physiological problem with a metaphysical property. Next, you are given a potion to drink. The liquid is dark and bitter, and it smells strongly of herbs. You are to drink a small cup of it every evening. The ingredients could be a cocktail of anything from the ancient medicinal cabinet. It would almost certainly contain plants considered to be emmenagoges herbs that promote menstruation, like penurial or mugwort. The goal is to ensure your system is properly purged of excess humus, relieving any pressure that might be pushing the womb upwards. This is where things get a bit dangerous. Some of these herbs, like penurial, are effective because they are toxic. In the right dose, they can stimulate uterine contractions. In the wrong dose, they can cause severe liver damage or worse. The line between a therapeutic dose and a poisonous one was perilously thin, and a physician's skill was measured in his ability to mix these potent cocktails correctly. Now for a truly weird and wonderful tidbit of ancient pharmacology. Your potion might also contain something called uterine stone or Hysteria. This wasn't a real anatomical object. It was a type of mineral, likely a form of bitumen or lignite, a type of soft coal, that was believed to have a specific affinity for the uterus. It was often found in and around Syria. The belief was that the stone could calm a suffocating wound. How by its smell. It was another tool in the olfactory arsenal. You might be told to drink a potion containing scrapings of the stone, or to wear a piece of it in an amulet around your neck, or even, you guessed it, to have its fumes wafted into your nether regions. The belief in specific minerals having targeted effects on specific organs was a common feature of ancient and medieval medicine. So your daily routine now includes a whole new set of rituals. In the morning, you might have the heavy, sticky plaster applied to your belly, which you wear all day under your chitin. It feels strange against your skin. A constant, weighty reminder of your condition. In the evening, you pinch your nose and swallow the bitter, murky potion, hoping it's doing its job and not pickling your insides. The experience is profoundly physical. Unlike the abstract theories of Plato or the subtle action of perfumes, this is medicine you can feel and taste. It makes the treatment feel more real. And, as with the other treatments, there's a powerful potential for the placebo effect. The very act of undergoing this complex, multi-step regimen can create a sense of control and hope. You are doing something about your illness. This psychological boost alone can be enough to reduce anxiety and its physical symptoms. Historians who study the history of pharmacology are fascinated by these ancient recipes. They try to reverse engineer them, to understand which ingredients might have had a genuine physiological effect and which were pure superstition. For example, some herbs used in these potions might have had mild sedative properties, which would have been genuinely helpful for a patient suffering from anxiety. Others were likely harmless but useless, while a few, as mentioned, were genuinely dangerous. It was a high-stakes game of trial and error, played out over centuries on the bodies of patients like you. As you choke down your nightly dose of bitter herbs and powdered uterine stone, you are a participant in this grand experiment. You don't know which part of your treatment is a potential lifesaver and which is a lump of coal in a fancy pouch. You only know what the doctor told you, that these substances will help moisten, weigh down, and pacify your restless womb. You put your faith in the bitter taste and the heavy plaster, hoping that this strange combination of folk magic, botanical knowledge, and sheer guesswork will finally bring you some peace. Time passes. Perhaps the strange potions and plasters have had some effect, or perhaps the sheer force of your family's will has prevailed. Your life changes. You may be married off. The procreative cure officially underway. The acute, terrifying symptoms may have subsided into a low-grade anxiety. Or perhaps they haven't, but history is moving on. And so is the theory of your illness. The world around you is shifting. The golden age of Athens is a memory. Alexander's conquests have come and gone, and now the rising power of Rome is casting its long shadow over the Mediterranean. Your personal story now merges with a much larger one, the transmission of Greek knowledge to the Roman world. And the wandering womb theory is packed in the luggage along with the philosophy, the art, and the architecture. It finds its new and most influential champion in a man named Galen of Pergamon. Imagine the medical world upgrading its operating system. Galen, a Greek physician who rose to prominence in the Roman Empire during the 2nd century CE, is that upgrade. He was a brilliant anatomist for his time, a tireless self-promoter, and a prolific writer. He took the Hippocratic tradition, systematized it, experimented with it, and then stamped his own name on it so forcefully that his teachings would dominate Western medicine for the next 300 years. If Hippocrates wrote the original code, Galen was the one who debuted it, added 1,000 new features, and made it the industry standard. For you, or rather, for your great-great-great-granddaughter living under Roman rule, the diagnosis would be the same, but the explanation would be more detailed, more complex, and somehow even more certain. Galen wholeheartedly accepted the idea of hysterical suffocation. He saw patients with the same symptoms: the choking, the seizures, the paralysis, and he agreed with his Greek predecessors it was all caused by the uterus. But Galen, being Galen, had to add his own spin. He was less keen on the wandering room idea. As a skilled anatomist who had dissected countless animals, though very few humans, as Roman custom forbade it, he knew that the uterus was held in place by strong ligaments. It couldn't literally pack up and travel to the head. This is a crucial modification. He dismisses the idea of a mobile organ as nonsense. So how did he explain the symptoms? He kept the core idea of uterine distress but changed the mechanism. Instead of the organ itself traveling, Galen proposed that a morbid humor or toxic vapor, originating from a distressed uterus, was the culprit. He was particularly interested in the idea of retained menstrual blood or, more controversially, retained female semen. Yes, Galen believed that women, like men, produced a form of seed, and that if it wasn't released through intercourse, it would put RAFY inside the body, creating a poisonous vapor. This toxic vapor would then rise through the body's vessels and channels, affecting other organs. If the vapor reached the heart, it caused palpitations. If it reached the diaphragm, it caused suffocation. If it reached the brain, it caused seizures, delirium, and all the other neurological symptoms associated with hysteria. So, the wound stayed put. But its toxic influence traveled. It was a brilliant move, really. It made the theory sound more scientific and anatomically plausible. While keeping the original conclusion entirely intact, the problem still originates in a woman's reproductive system, and the cause is still, fundamentally, a lack of sexual activity and procreation. Here's a lesser-known detail about Galen's view. He was a great believer in a therapy called venesection, or bloodletting. He thought it could rebalance the body's humors. For a woman suffering from hysteria, especially if he believed it was caused by retained menstrual blood, he might prescribe bloodletting from a vein in the ankle, believing it would draw the bad humors downwards, away from the vital organs of the chest and head. So, under Galen's care, you might be spared the foul smells, but you might end up having your ankle bled instead. Galen's authority was immense. He was the personal physician to several Roman emperors. His writings were so comprehensive and so self-assured that for centuries to come, few dared to question them. He had an answer for everything. The debate about whether his theories helped or hindered medicine in the long run is still a hot topic among historians. On one hand, his emphasis on observation and experiment was forward-thinking. On the other, his dogmatic certainty created a system so complete that it stifled further inquiry for more than a millennium. So, the theory of the wandering womb doesn't die. It evolves. It puts on a Roman toga, gets a more sophisticated explanation, and becomes even more entrenched in medical doctrine. The label hysteria sticks. The cause is still located squarely in your uterus, and the cure is still, you guessed it, marriage and children. The Romans, practical as they were, loved this aspect of the theory. It reinforced their own social values of family, duty, and the production of future Roman citizens. Your personal suffering has now been codified by the most famous doctor in the world. The strange feelings in your body are no longer just a Greek physician's strange idea, they are a Galenic medical fact. The theory has been tested, refined, and given the imperial stamp of approval. It has become medical dogma, as solid and imposing as a Roman aqueduct, and it's destined to carry this stream of thought all the way through the Middle Ages and beyond. Under the influence of Galen's more scientific model, the disease becomes even more systemated. The idea of a toxic vapor or humor rising from the uterus allows physicians to create a detailed map of symptoms based on where this vapor attacks. The diagnosis is no longer a vague "your womb is wandering," it's a specific "the uterine vapor is currently afflicting your heart." This gives the whole process an air of precision and sophistication. Imagine you're now in a Roman villa, complaining to a Galenic-trained physician. You describe the familiar fluttering in your chest, the sudden, racing heartbeat that feels like a trapped bird, the overwhelming sense of doom that accompanies it. The physician would nod knowingly. "Oh," he would say, "a clear case of the womb's vapor afflicting the cardiopericardial region." He would explain that when the toxic humor born of retained seed or menstrual fluid ascends, it can envelop the heart, This vapor, being cold and heavy by nature a key part of Galen's humoral theories, constricts the heart, preventing it from beating properly. This constriction causes the palpitations. The vapor also cools the innate heat of the heart, which is the source of courage and vitality. This cooling effect is what causes the profound anxiety and fear. It's a beautifully complete, if completely wrong, explanation. Every part of your subjective experience is accounted for within his model. Now, let's say on another day, your primary symptom is a blinding headache and a dizzy spell that makes the whole room spin. You feel faint. Your vision blurs, and you have to lie down. You describe this to the doctor. Of course, he'd say, the vapor has risen further. It has now reached the brain. He would explain that the brain, the seat of reason and sensory perception, is exquisitely sensitive to these uterine toxins. When the vapor penetrates the cranial cavity, it agitates the animal spirits, the mysterious substance thought to control sensation and movement. This agitation causes the dizziness and blurred vision. If the vapor is particularly potent, it can cause a full-blown hysterical seizure, where the body convulses uncontrollably. To the Roman physician, this was not a neurological event in the modern sense. It was a case of the brain being temporarily poisoned by fumes from below. Here we can dive into a particularly strange and specific symptom they described aphonia, or the sudden loss of voice. A patient would be talking one moment and completely mute the next. This was a classic hysterical symptom. The Galenic explanation: the uterine vapor had ascended directly to the larynx and vocal cords, physically obstructing them or chilling them into paralysis. The idea that a bad smell from your uterus could literally silence you from the inside is one of the most vivid examples of this theory in action. This mapping of symptoms created a kind of predictive model. A good physician was one who could track the supposed progress of the vapor. He might say, "You are feeling palpitations today. We must act quickly with cooling poultices and perhaps some bleeding from the arm, lest the vapor ascend further and affect the head by tomorrow." He gave both doctor and patient a sense of being proactive, of fighting a known enemy whose movements could be anticipated. There is, of course, a raging debate among medical historians about what these women were actually experiencing. The heart palpitations and anxiety sound exactly like a modern description of a panic attack. The seizures could have been forms of epilepsy that were misdiagnosed. The aphonia could be a conversion disorder, where psychological stress manifests as a physical symptom. The Galenic model took all these disparate conditions, which we now know have completely different origins: cardiological, neurological, psychological, and swept them all under one giant, uterine power drug. It was intellectually neat but medically disastrous, preventing doctors from seeing the true nature of these illnesses for centuries. As the patient in this system, you are living in a state of constant internal siege. Your own body is the source of a poison that can strike anywhere, at any time. One day it attacks your lungs, making you feel as though you're suffocating. The next, it attacks your limbs, causing numbness and paralysis. The doctor's chart of your illness would look like a battle map, tracking the enemy's movements from the southern territories of the pelvis to the northern capital of the brain. This detailed, systematic approach, courtesy of Galen, made the theory of hysteria more robust than ever. It had shed its folksy wandering animal skin and emerged as a sophisticated doctrine of morbid humors and toxic vapors. It was harder to dismiss because it sounded so much more plausible. It was locked into a comprehensive system of physiology that explained everything from digestion to emotion. To question the hysterical vapor was to question the entire Galenic model of the human body, a task that very few thinkers would have the courage or the evidence to attempt for another 1,000 years. With the theory of toxic vapors firmly established, the treatments also become more targeted. At least in theory, if you can't lure the organ itself, you have to deal with the fumes it's emitting. This leads to one of the most peculiar and invasive treatments in the history of the internal fumigation. The logic is a direct extension of the olfactory therapies, but with a significant escalation. If smelling things isn't enough, it's time to get the therapeutic substances closer to the source. You are laid to a special piece of equipment. It might be a stool or a chair with a hole in the seat, similar to the one used for the earlier sweet-smelling smug sessions. But this procedure is more intense. It's called vaginal fumigation. You are instructed to sit on this apparatus, without any undergarments, while a pot of smoldering ingredients is placed directly underneath you. The goal is to have the smoke and vapor travel directly into your vagina, to treat the uterus at its source. This was a common procedure, described in numerous ancient medical texts. The ingredients in the pot depended on the goal. If the physician believed your womb was cold and needed to be warmed, the pot might contain warming herbs like cinnamon or juniper. If he believed it was too wet and needed to be dried, he might use astringent substances. But most often, especially if the goal was to combat the foul vapors of putrefying seed, the fumigation would involve sweet-smelling substances like myrrh or frankincense. The idea was to pump perfume directly into the engine room to counteract the bad fumes it was producing. Imagine the experience. You are sitting on this strange contraption, a plume of smoke billowing up into the most private part of your body. It's uncomfortable, undignified, and deeply strained. The room would be filled with the thick, cloying smoke. The heat from the brazier would be noticeable, and there was always the risk of being burned if the procedure was not managed carefully. But things could get even more extreme. Beyond simple fumigation, physicians developed a technique of vapor baths or irrigations. This involved introducing steam or even liquid concoctions directly into the uterus. They had specialized tools for this, a primitive form of syringe or cannula made of metal or bone. A mixture of herbs boiled in water and wine would be prepared, and then this warm liquid would be gently injected into the vagina. This was called sitz bathing or, in more direct interventions, an infusion. Here's a small, curious detail about this process: the choice of liquid was paramount. Physicians had elaborate recipes. An infusion to soften a supposedly hard uterus might involve a decoction of mallow root and linseed in warm water. An infusion to cleanse it might use a more astringent mixture, perhaps with a bit of honey for its supposed purifying properties. It was a kind of internal deep cleaning, based on the humoral properties of the ingredients. This practice sits at a fascinating and dangerous intersection of care and harm. On one hand, for certain conditions, the soothing sitz bath could genuinely relieve pain and inflammation. It's a practice still used in hydrotherapy today for various pelvic issues, so it's possible that some women found real, tangible relief from these treatments, even if the theory behind them was nonsense. On the other hand, the practice of introducing non-sterile liquids and instruments into the vagina and uterus was incredibly risky. It could introduce infections, disrupt the natural vaginal flora, and cause inflammation or injury. In a world without antibiotics, a simple infection could be a death sentence. The physicians performing these procedures were walking a fine line, with no concept of germ theory to guide them. The academic debate here revolves around the frequency and exact nature of these interventions. Some historians argue they were a common, mainstream treatment, while others suggest they were a more extreme measure, reserved for the most severe and stubborn cases of hysteria. The texts describe the procedures, but they don't always tell us how often a typical physician would resort to them. Was this a weekly treatment, or a last-ditch effort? For you, the patient, this is the escalation of your cure. Your body is no longer just a passive recipient of ointments and potions. It is being actively and invasively cleansed. You are submitting to a procedure that is both deeply intimate and clinical. The physician directs it, but female attendants or midwives would be the ones to administer it. It's another example of how your illness, and its treatment, puts you in a position of complete passivity. You are the vessel to be fumigated, irrigated, and purified. As you sit there, enveloped in a cloud of medicated steam, you might wonder if this is truly helping. Perhaps you feel a soothing warmth that eases some of your abdominal cramping, or perhaps you just feel a sense of profound strangeness, submitting to a ritual that feels more like a religious purification than a medical treatment. Whatever the physical effect, The psychological one is powerful. You are at the pinnacle of galenic intervention, a living testament to the belief that the path to a woman's mind runs directly through her womb. The theory of the wandering womb and its galenic successor. The toxic vapor didn't just stay in the doctor's office. Like a dye spreading through water, this medical belief seeped into the very fabric of society, coloring legal and social attitudes towards women. What started as a diagnosis became a justification, a scientific rationale for the existing social order. Imagine a legal dispute in ancient Greece or Rome. A family is arguing over an inheritance. A woman, perhaps a daughter who stands to inherit a significant portion of the family estate, is described by her male relatives as being emotional, unreliable, and prone to strange fits of anxiety and melodrama. Her testimony in the dispute is questioned. Her competency to manage property is challenged. And what evidence do her opponents bring for a physician's diagnosis of hysteria? Her normal emotional responses to a stressful legal battle, her anger, her tears, her frustration are reframed as symptoms. Her arguments are not the product of reason, but the ravings of a woman whose mind is clouded by uterine fumes. The diagnosis becomes a powerful legal weapon. It provides a medical pretext to discount a woman's testimony, question her sanity, and ultimately, deny her legal and financial rights. How can she manage an estate? The argument would go, when she cannot even manage her own womb. This is not just speculation. Legal texts and rhetorical handbooks from the period show an awareness of these medical ideas. A lawyer arguing a case might subtly hint that the woman on the other side is of a hysterical nature, knowing that this would plant a seed of doubt in the minds of the all-male judges or jury. It was an effective, if insidious, character assassination tool. Here's a specific, and rather telling, legal connection. In some Greek city-states, the law required a woman to have a male guardian, a kyrios, who was legally responsible for her. He would manage her property and represent her in all legal matters. The underlying assumption was that women were not equipped to handle these things themselves. The medical theory of hysteria provided a perfect biological underpinning for this legal reality. Women required a kyrios because their very physiology made them inherently unstable and irrational. Their wombs could, at any moment, go rogue and overwhelm their reason. The law and the medicine reinforced each other in a perfect, self-sustaining loop. The belief also had a profound impact on marriage and divorce. A husband could, in some circumstances, seek to dissolve a marriage if his wife was unable to bear children. While this was primarily about the need for an heir, a diagnosis of hysteria could add another layer. An empty womb wasn't just a dynastic problem, it was a medical one. The woman's childlessness was framed as the cause of her madness and difficult behavior, making her an unsuitable wife. Conversely, a woman's options were severely limited. If she were in an unhappy or abusive marriage, her emotional distress could easily be labeled as hysteria. Her desire to leave the marriage wasn't seen as a rational choice, but as a symptom of her underlying pathology. As you recall, was more intercourse and pregnancy the very things that would further trap her in the marriage she wished to escape? This is where historians still debate the nuances. Was every accusation of hysteria a calculated, cynical ploy to dispossess a woman of her rights? Probably not. Many people, including the women themselves, likely believed the diagnosis was real. A family might genuinely believe their daughter was medically unfit to manage her inheritance, and that they were acting in her best interest by taking control. They saw themselves as protecting her from her own volatile nature. This is what makes the ideology so powerful. It doesn't always have to be malicious to be oppressive. It can be cloaked in the language of care and concern. You, living within this system, would experience this on a deeply personal level. Every time you felt a strong emotion, grief, anger, even passionate joy, you might pause and question it. Is this a real, valid feeling, or is it just the vapor, this internal self-monitoring? This doubt about the authenticity of your own feelings is one of the most insidious effects of the diagnosis. It teaches you to distrust yourself. Your legal standing is fragile, your social role rigidly defined, and now you have a medical reason that explains and justifies it all. The theory of the wandering womb has escaped the confines of the medical texts. It's in the courtroom, it's in the marriage contracts, and it's in the quiet conversations between men deciding the fate of their wives, daughters, and sisters. It has become more than a diagnosis, it's a tool for managing society. And it's a tool that will prove to be remarkably durable. As the Roman Empire crumbles and Europe splinters into the era we now call the Middle Ages, you might think such a bizarre, classical theory would fade away along with the aqueducts and the legions. But you would be wrong. The ghost of the wandering womb proves to be remarkably resilient. It survives the fall of Rome. It's translated from Greek and Latin into Arabic, and then back into Latin again, and finds a new, and in some ways more sinister, home in the medieval world. Imagine yourself now not in a sun-drenched Greek courtyard or a Roman villa, but in a damp, cold stone castle or a small, crowded medieval town. The world is governed by a new, powerful force, the Christian Church. The body is no longer just a system of humors, it's a vessel for the soul, a battleground between God and the devil, and within this new framework, Hysteria gets a dark and dangerous makeover. The Quorgolenic idea persists. Physicians in the great Islamic centers of learning, like Baghdad and Cordoba, read Galen and Hippocrates, thinkers like Avicenna, in his monumental canon of medicine, described hysterical suffocation in terms almost identical to Galen's of vapor rising from the uterus due to retained fluids. These texts were later translated into Latin and became the foundation of medical education in the new universities of medieval Europe. So, a university-trained physician in Paris or Bologna would still diagnose your choking fits and anxiety as a uterine problem. The scientific explanation was still on the books. But outside the university, in the villages and towns, a different interpretation was taking hold. The symptoms of hysteria's issues, muteness, paralysis, emotional outbursts looked an awful lot like something else. People were very concerned about demonic possession. This is where the two streams of thought begin to merge and curdle. A priest, seeing a young woman convulsing on the floor, might not think of retained female seed. He would think of Satan. A village elder, hearing of your strange visions and anxieties, might whisper the word witchcraft. The line between a medical condition and a spiritual one becomes dangerously blurred. Let's consider a specific and chilling case. You experience a particularly severe episode. Your body goes rigid. You feel a crushing weight on your chest. And you can't breathe, a classic description of sleep paralysis, but also a textbook symptom of hysterical suffocation. In the ancient world, it was your womb at your throat. In the medieval world, it could be a demon sitting on your chest. The same set of terrifying physical sensations could be interpreted into completely different, but equally frightening, ways. Here's a lesser-known aspect of this transition. It wasn't always a simple switch from a medical to a supernatural explanation. For many medieval thinkers, it was both. They believed that the devil and his demons could exploit a person's physical weaknesses. So your uterus, with its inherent instability and tendency to produce foul vapors, was seen as a weak point, a gateway. A physician might diagnose you with hysteria caused by a humoral imbalance, while a priest might agree, adding that this physical vulnerability is what allowed a demon to enter and amplify the symptoms. Your womb was now not just a restless animal, it was a potential landing pad for the forces of evil. This created a terrifying diagnostic dilemma. Are you sick? Or are you sinful? Do you need a doctor? Or do you need an exorcist often? The answer was both. You might be subjected to the old Galenic treatments, bloodletting from the ankle, foul-smelling potions at the same time as you were being made to pray first, and perhaps even undergo a rite of exorcism. The great scholarly debate among historians of this period is about how and when the demonic model began to overtake the medical one, particularly in the context of the witch hunts that would gain momentum in the late Middle Ages and early modern period. Some scholars argue that the medical explanation always remained a viable alternative, while others contend that for women, especially poor and elderly women. The risk of being accused of witchcraft for symptoms of hysteria became terrifyingly real. The infamous Malleus Maleficum of the Hammer of Witches, a 15th century witch hunting manual, even specifically discusses the role of the uterus and midwives in its dark, paranoid worldview. You are now trapped in a far more dangerous web. In ancient Greece, the worst outcome of your diagnosis was a forced marriage or some unpleasant fumigation. In the Middle Ages, the stakes are infinitely higher. Your private suffering could become a public spectacle, your symptoms evidence in a heresy trial. The fear of being misunderstood, of being labeled not just as ill but as evil, would add a whole new layer of psychological terror to your already existing anxiety. The ghost of the wandering womb haunts the cloisters and castles of medieval Europe, whispering its ancient diagnosis. But now it has a new, shadowy companion, the specter of demonic influence. Your body is still the problem, your uterus still the source, but the nature of the threat has changed. It's no longer just about your health, it's about the salvation of your very soul. For more than 500 years, the theory has reigned supreme, evolving from a wandering animal to a toxic vapor to a demonic gateway, but always originating in the same place. But as the medieval world gives way to the intellectual ferment of the Renaissance, the first real cracks begin to appear in this ancient edifice. The seeds of doubt, planted by a new way of thinking, start to sprout. Imagine yourself in a bustling city in Renaissance Italy. Perhaps Padua or Bologna, centers of the new learning. The air is electric with rediscovered classical texts, new art forms, and a burgeoning spirit of humanism, which places a renewed emphasis on direct observation and human experience. This spirit begins to infect the world of medicine. A new generation of physicians, emboldened by this climate of inquiry, starts to do something radical. They start to look for themselves, rather than simply trusting the ancient texts of Galen. The first challenges are cautious and respectful. A physician might try to treat us on diseases of women and politely note that, in his own experience, he has seen men exhibit symptoms remarkably similar to hysteria: profound melancholy, seizures, shortness of breath. This was a direct contradiction of the core principle that the disease was uniquely female and uterine in origin. He might not have an alternative theory, but he has an observation that doesn't fit the model. It's a small anomaly, a loose thread, but it's a start. Another physician might begin to question the treatments. After centuries of prescribing foul-smelling potions on fumigation, someone finally notes that these aggressive therapies often seem to make the patient worse, not better. He might suggest that a gentler approach rests, the calm environment, soothing music is more effective. This is a practical critique. He's not attacking the theory of the toxic vapor itself, but he's questioning the logic of the cures that spring from it. If scaring the womb with bad smells doesn't work, maybe the premise is flawed. But the most significant challenge comes from a new and controversial field: anatomy. For centuries, European medicine had relied on Galen's anatomical descriptions, which were based almost entirely on the dissection of animals like Barbary apes and pigs. The prohibition on human dissection, enforced by both custom and religious authority, meant that no one had systematically mapped the human body. Now that is beginning to change. In the anatomy theaters of the new universities, brave professors are starting to perform public dissections on the bodies of executed criminals. This is a momentous shift. For the first time, physicians are getting a clear, unmediated look at human viscera. Here, we encounter a fascinating and little-known figure who represents this shift, a physician named Ambroise Paré, a 16th century French surgeon. While not the first to question Galen, he was a practical, hands-on surgeon who trusted his own eyes. In his writings, he describes cases of hysterical suffocation but expresses skepticism about the cause. He recounts a story of a distraught widow suffering from choking fits. Instead of blaming her womb, he diagnosed the problem as her corset being laced too tightly, combined with the emotional distress of her grief. It's a moment of stunningly modern, common-sense clinical reasoning. This questioning attitude creates a significant point of debate for historians. When did the wandering womb theory officially die? There is no single moment. It was a slow, uneven process of erosion. For a long time, the old theory and the new observations existed side by side. A doctor might accept the new anatomical findings but still believe in a form of uterine vapor, unwilling to let go of the core idea. The transition was messy, filled with contradictions. One of the biggest points of contention is how much social factors, versus purely scientific ones, contributed to the theory's decline. As women in some circles gained a bit more social agency, was it simply less plausible to see them as slaves to their biology? As a woman living through this period of change, you would be caught in the crosscurrents. You might see one doctor who gives you the traditional diagnosis and prescribes the old, foul potions. Another, more modern-minded physician might dismiss the uterine explanation entirely and tell you your problem is one of vapors of the spleen or melancholy, shifting the source of the problem to a different organ, but still retaining a humoral explanation. The ground is shifting under your feet. The old certainties are being questioned, but no single, coherent new theory has emerged to take their place. For a patient, this can be even more confusing. Is your problem in your womb, your spleen, your brain, or your soul? The doctors are starting to argue amongst themselves. A sight that is both reassuring they're thinking critically and terrifying they don't actually know. The intellectual rebellion is brewing. The weapons are observation, experience, and a growing insistence on seeing with one's own eyes. The ancient authority of Galen is no longer unassailable. The theory of the wandering womb, which has survived empires and religions, is finally facing its most formidable enemy, a sharp knife and a skeptical eye. The revolution is coming, and it will be televised, so to speak, from the stage of the anatomy theatre. The slow erosion of the old theory culminates in the work of one man and his revolutionary book. The setting is the mid-16th century, the heart of the scientific renaissance. The man is Andreas Vesalius, a Flemish-born anatomist working at the University of Padua, and his weapon is a book that will change medicine forever. Dehumanize or pers fabrique on the fabric of the human body. Vesalius is the embodiment of the new spirit of inquiry. He is not content to read Galen, he is determined to see for himself. He becomes a master dissector, conducting his own anatomical investigations with unprecedented rigor and detail. He is an artist and a scientist, and his book is filled with stunningly beautiful and meticulously accurate woodcut illustrations of the human body, based on his own direct observations. For you, as a woman of this era, Vesalius is a distant, academic figure. You would never meet him or attend one of his famous public dissections. That his work will have a profound, if delayed, impact on the understanding of your body. In the pages of De Fabrique, Vesalius systematically dismantles centuries of Galenic anatomy. He demonstrates, through direct observation and illustration, over 200 errors in Galen's text series that stemmed from Galen's reliance on animal, rather than human, subjects. He corrects the description of the human jawbone, the sternum, the liver, and countless other structures. And then, he gets to the female pelvis. With his scalpel and his keen eye, Vesalius examines the uterus and its surrounding structures. He sees what no one had bothered to properly document before: the incredibly strong network of muscles and ligaments that hold the uterus firmly in place. He traces the broad ligament, the round ligaments. The uterosacral ligaments, a tough, fibrous web that anchors the organ securely within the pelvic cavity. Based on this direct, irrefutable evidence, he makes a simple, devastating declaration: the womb cannot wander. It is physically impossible. The idea of a mobile organ, floating freely around the torso, is an anatomical fantasy. He writes it down, politely but firmly, pointing out the anatomical reality. He doesn't speculate on what does cause the symptoms of hysteria. As a pure anatomist, that's not his primary concern. His job is to describe the body as it is. And the body, as it is, does not have a traveling uterus. This is the scientific death blow. The core premise of the original Greek theory, the one that started it all, is proven to be factually incorrect. The animal in the animal is, in fact, tethered down like every other organ. Here's a small but crucial detail about Berzelius's work. He wasn't just a scientist. He was a revolutionary publisher. He understood the power of the printing press. De Fabrique was not just a collection of notes, it was a masterpiece of art and typography, designed to be spread far and wide. The detailed illustrations were key. A physician who couldn't read Latin could still look at the pictures of the female pelvis and see, with his own eyes, the ligaments holding the womb in place. It was visual evidence, easily reproducible and distributed, and it was devastating to the old theory. However, the impact was not immediate. This is a major point of discussion for historians of science. A scientific breakthrough doesn't instantly change the world. Berzelius was attacked viciously by the traditional Galenists of his day. They called him an arrogant upstart and insisted that Galen must be right and the human body must have changed since antiquity. The belief in the wandering womb was so deeply entrenched that many physicians simply refused to accept the evidence of their own eyes. They would rather believe Berzelius's dissections were flawed than accept that Galen was wrong. This created a strange period of cognitive dissonance in medicine. A doctor might have a copy of Berzelius's Fabrique on his shelf, showing the fixed uterus, but in his clinic, he might still diagnose a patient with an ailment caused by uterine vapors. The anatomical fact and the clinical practice existed in separate, conflicting realities. The old theory, even when proven anatomically false, had a powerful inertia. It was familiar, it was comprehensive, and it offered a simple explanation for a complex set of symptoms. Doctors were reluctant to give it up without a viable alternative. For you, the patient. This means the revolution happening in the anatomy theaters of Italy might take a generation or more to trickle down to your local physician. The ghost of the wandering womb is tough. It has been mortally wounded by Berzelius's scalpel. But it refuses to lie down and die. It will continue to haunt the medical field. A phantom limb of a theory that has been amputated but is still, somehow, being felt. The anatomical foundation is gone. The house should collapse. But the idea of hysteria, the belief that a woman's emotional and physical suffering originates in her uniquely female nature, is too powerful to disappear so easily. It will simply have to find a new home, a new scientific justification. The womb may now be fixed in place, but the blame is still firmly attached to it. Berzelius may have chained the womb to the pelvic wall, but he couldn't kill the idea of hysteria. The diagnosis was too useful, too ingrained, too perfectly explanatory for a wide range of baffling symptoms. So if the womb itself couldn't travel, and the toxic vapor theory was starting to seem a bit medieval, medicine needed a new explanation. The 17th and 18th centuries, the Age of Enlightenment, became a period of frantic rebranding for your old ailment. Hysteria was about to get a neurological makeover. Imagine yourself now in London or Paris in the late 17th century. The scientific revolution is in full swing. Thinkers are obsessed with mechanics, fluids, and the newly discovered nervous system. The body is no longer seen as a collection of humors, but as a complex machine of pipes, pumps, and vibrating strings, and the new star of the show is the nerves. A prominent English physician, Thomas Wallace, a key figure in the history of neurology, who actually coined the term neurology, is one of the first to try to formally relocate hysteria. He and his contemporaries, like the influential Thomas Sydenham, look at hysterical patients and see the unmistakable signs of a disorder of the brain and nerves. The seizures, the paralysis, the emotional volatility. This wasn't a problem of the uterus, they argued, but a problem of the animal spirits flowing through the nerves. So the cause of your suffering is officially moved. It's no longer a uterine problem, it's a neurological one. This sounds like a massive step forward, and in some ways, it was. For the first time, men could also be officially diagnosed with hysteria, since they obviously had brains and nerves too. Sydenham himself noted that it was one of the most common ailments he saw, affecting men as well as women. But here's the catch. While they moved the location of the disease, they didn't really change their opinion on who was most susceptible to it. Why? The consensus was that while men could get hysteria, it was still overwhelmingly a female complaint. And why? Because women, they argued, had an inherently weaker, more delicate, and more irritable nervous system. And what was the source of this female neurological fragility? You guessed it, their reproductive organs. The womb, even though it was now stationary, was still seen as the great destabilizer. They proposed that the uterus had a unique and powerful connection to the nervous system. A difficult menstruation, a pregnancy, or a period of celibate tension could send disruptive signals up the nerves to the brain, causing the entire system to go haywire. The womb wasn't sending up vapor anymore, it was sending up bad neurological data. It was like a faulty peripheral device constantly crashing the central computer. Here we find a fascinating, quirky detail of the new theory, the concept of sympathy. This was the idea that organs could communicate with each other over long distances through the nervous system. The uterus was thought to have a particularly strong sympathetic connection with the brain, the stomach, and the heart. So when the womb was agitated, it could cause symptoms in these other, distant parts of the body, not by physical contact, but through these invisible nervous wires. It was a high-tech, neurological reboot of the ancient Greek concept of sympathy. So for you, the patient, the explanation changes, but the experience is eerily similar. You go to the doctor with your anxiety and palpitations. He no longer talks of a wandering animal. Instead, he speaks of your delicate nerve fibers and your irritable disposition. He might say your animal spirits are in a disorderly flurry. He might even blame your lifestyle. Were you reading too many novels? The overstimulation of reading fiction was considered a potential trigger for a hysterical fit in an already delicate female nervous system. The academic debate among historians here is crucial. Was this neurological turn a genuine step towards a more scientific and less misogynistic understanding of these symptoms? Or was it just old wine in a new, nerve-wrapped bottle? The answer, it seemed, is both. It was progress in that it moved the discussion towards the brain and away from a single, maligned organ. But it was a continuation of the old tradition in that it continued to pathologize femininity itself, just using a more modern, scientific vocabulary. A woman's nature was no longer humoral, but neurological, and it was still seen as inherently flawed. The diagnosis has been successfully rebranded. Hysteria is no longer a gynecological issue, it's a fashionable neurological disorder. It has shed its ancient, earthy origins and put on the clean, white lab coat of the new science. But, if you look closely at the fine print, the message is the same. The problem, my dear, is not your life, your society, or your lack of options. The problem is you. It's just located a little higher up than we used to think. Let's leap forward again, past the age of powdered wigs and into the gaslit, industrial world of the late 19th century. We land in Paris, the glittering, intellectual capital of the world, and in a sprawling hospital called the Salpêtrière, Hysteria is about to have its most famous, most theatrical, and most controversial moment in the spotlight. Your old ailment is about to become a star. The man at the center of it all is Jean-Martin Charcot, a brilliant and charismatic neurologist who is often called the founder of modern neurology. The Salpêtrière was originally a dumping ground for the city's poor, insane, and incurable women. Charcot, upon his appointment there, transformed it into a world-renowned center for neurological research, and his star subjects, the focus of his intense study, were the hysterics. Imagine you are one of these women at the Salpêtrière. You might be suffering from any number of conditions. We would now recognize epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, complex trauma, severe anxiety. But to Charcot, you are a hysteric, a living library of fascinating symptoms. He is not interested in your feelings or your life story. He is interested in your body's performance, your contractures, your paralysis, your dramatic seizures. Charkit's great contribution, he believed, was to prove that hysteria was a real, legitimate neurological disease, not just malingering or female play acting. He did this through his famous Tuesday lectures. These were not dry academic affairs, they were grand theatrical events, open to the public and attended by the cream of Parisian society: doctors, artists, writers, and socialites. Here's how it would work. You, the patient, would be brought out onto the stage of the lecture hall. Charkit, the master showman, would then induce a hysterical attack in you, often using hypnosis. Under his hypnotic suggestion, you would enact the classic stages of the attack that he himself had codified. First, the epileptoid phase, with convulsions resembling an epileptic seizure. Then, the grand movements phase, with wild, illogical movements, thrashing, arching of the back into the famous arcane circular dramatic back bend that became the visual signature of Charkit's hysteria. Finally, the hallucinatory phase, where you might act out dreamlike, often terrifying, scenarios. The whole performance was meticulously documented with photographs and drawings. Charkit was creating a visual taxonomy of suffering, proving that hysteria had its own predictable rules and patterns, just like any other real disease. A strange and often overlooked detail of these performances is the role of the male assistants. During the arcane circle, the patient would be held up by male attendants, her body forming a dramatic bridge. The resulting photographs are deeply unsettling, a combination of clinical observation, artistic pose, and a subtle, voyeuristic tension. The patient is both the object of scientific study and a piece of living sculpture, her distress put on display for the public gaze. For you, the patient on stage, the experience would be profoundly disorienting. You are simultaneously the center of attention and completely powerless. You are giving a command performance of your own illness, but the director is Charkit, and the script is his theory. And this is where the fierce historical debate begins. Was Charkit discovering the hidden laws of hysteria, or was he creating them? Many historians and critics did argue that he was unwittingly training his patients. These women, institutionalized and dependent on the doctors for their care, learned what was expected of them. They learned to perform the correct type of seizure, the one that would earn them the attention and interest of the great doctor. The Tuesday lectures were less a scientific demonstration and more collaborative, albeit deeply unbalanced, theatrical performance. The patients were not just subjects, they were actresses in Charkit's medical theater. Charkit's work made hysteria the most talked about disease of the late 19th century. It was fashionable, it was dramatic, it was modern, but despite his efforts to frame it as a purely neurological condition, the old ideas still lingered. The vast majority of his style patients were women, and the source of their neurological instability was still often vaguely linked to their female nature. The traumatic events that he believed could trigger hysteria in his patients were often, upon closer examination in his case files, stories of sexual assault and abuse, but this crucial link was largely overlooked in favor of the more spectacular, physical symptoms. The ghost of the wandering womb has found its way onto the stage. It no longer wanders or sends up fumes, but it performs. He contorts the body into dramatic poses under the hypnotic gaze of a master physician. Your suffering has been codified, cataloged, and turned into a spectacle. You are famous, in a way. You are the queen of the hysterics. But you are as trapped as your ancient Greek sister ever was trapped, not by ligaments or vapors, but by a diagnosis that has turned your life into a performance for the consumption of others. And in the audience, watching these performances with intense interest, is a young doctor from Vienna who will soon take the story in a completely new direction. In the audience at the Salpêtrière, a young, ambitious neurologist from Vienna named Sigmund Freud is watching Charkit test demonstrations. Utterly captivated, he is impressed by the raw power of the symptoms. But he feels that Charkit, for all his brilliance, is missing the point. HES observing the performance. But HES not asking why the performance is happening. Freud will take the hysteric off the stage and put her on a couch, and in doing so, he will transform hysteria one last time, dragging it out of the realm of neurology and into the new, murky world of psychoanalysis. You are now in Freud's consulting room at Berggasse 19 in Vienna. The gas lights are gone, replaced by the soft glow of electric lamps. The room is famously cluttered with books, papers, and a vast collection of ancient artifact statues from Egypt, Rome, and Greece. The air is thick with the smell of old paper and cigar smoke, and in the center of it all is the famous psychoanalytic couch, draped in a heavy Persian rug. You are not asked to perform your seizures. You are asked to lie down on the couch, to look away from the doctor who sits in a chair behind you, out of sight, and to talk. You are instructed to say whatever comes into your mind, no matter how trivial, embarrassing, or nonsensical it seems. This is the new method-free association. The cure is no longer in potions or perfumes or hypnotic commands. The cure is in words. The talking cure, as one of Freud's early patients, Bertha Pappenheim, famously known as an O, called it. Freud listens to your stories, your dreams, your slips of the tongue, and from these fragments, he constructs a radical new theory. Hysteria, he declares, is not a disease of the wandering womb or the feeble nerves. It is a disease of memory. He argues that your physical symptoms, your paralyzed arm, your nervous cough, your choking sensation are not random. They are symbolic representations of a forgotten, traumatic memory. The idea is that you experienced something so painful, so unacceptable to your conscious mind often, in Freud's view, something of a sexual nature from childhood, that you repressed it, you pushed it deep into your unconscious. But the memory, and the powerful emotion attached to it, doesn't just disappear. It festers, and eventually, it finds a way to express itself by being converted into a physical symptom. Your body, in Freud's model, is speaking the secret your mind cannot bear to acknowledge. Your paralyzed leg isn't paralyzed because of a nerve lesion, it's paralyzed because it's symbolically preventing you from taking a false step or moving forward in a situation that terrifies you. The lump in your throat, the classic globus hystericus, is the physical manifestation of a secret you are choking on. This is a revolutionary leap. For the first time, your personal story, your inner life, is seen as the direct cause of your illness. It's a profound validation of your subjective experience. However, it comes with a heavy price. The unacceptable thoughts Freud so often discovered were almost always sexual in nature, and often involved incestuous desires or fantasies. He initially believed his patients' stories of childhood sexual abuse were real, his seduction theories. But he later abandoned this idea, concluding instead that these were just the fantasies and wishes of the patients themselves. This is one of the most controversial and fiercely debated reversals in the history of psychology. Did Freud abandon the seduction theory because the evidence didn't support it? Or because accusing the respectable fathers of Vienna of such acts was professionally unsocially untenable? Critics argue that with this move, Freud effectively blamed the victim. The trauma wasn't something that was done to you, it was something you wanted or imagined. Your illness was no longer caused by a wandering womb, but by your own dark, repressed, and now guilty, desires. A quirky detail of the Freudian world is the sheer power of symbolism. Everything could be a symbol. A hat could be a phallic symbol. A box could be a uterine symbol. Your nervous habit of fiddling with your purse could be interpreted as a complex psychodrama about your sexuality. The world of the hysteric became a dense forest of symbols that only the psychoanalyst, with his special knowledge, could interpret. The womb itself makes a kind of symbolic comeback in Freudian theory. While he rejected the literal wandering womb, the concept of the uterus and femininity remained central. Female hysteria was intrinsically linked to penis envy and the unresolved psychological dramas of the Oedipus complex. The problem was still, in a fundamental way, linked to the fact of being female. You, lying on that couch, are now in a new kind of trap. Your every word is being sifted for hidden meaning. Your protest that a dream about a train is just a dream about a train are met with a knowing silence from the man behind you. To get better, you must accept his interpretation. You must unearth the correct traumatic memory and acknowledge your repressed desires. The cure is no longer a physical intervention but a psychological re-education. Freud's theories would dominate the 20th century understanding of the mind. He took hysteria, this ancient, shape-shifting ailment, and gave it its final, modern form. The womb has completed its long journey. It started as a physical wanderer, became a source of toxic fumes, transformed into a neurological weak point, performed on a Parisian stage, and has now finally settled into the deep, dark basement of the unconscious mind. It's no longer an animal, but it's still a ghost, haunting the house of psychoanalysis. The 20th century rolls on. Two world wars scour the face of Europe. Technology advances at a dizzying pace, and the world of medicine undergoes a series of radical transformations. Freud's psychoanalytic theories, while hugely influential in culture and the humanities, begin to lose their iron grip on clinical medicine. A new neuroscientific, evidence-based practice is dawning, an era of brain scans, chemical neurotransmitters, and randomized controlled trials. In this new, brightly lit world, a diagnosis as vague, as theatrical, and as freighted with historical baggage as hysteria begins to look like a relic from a bygone age. Imagine yourself now in the 1960s or 1970s. You go to a doctor's office. It's no longer a cluttered Victorian study, but a clean, sterile space with fluorescent lighting and 4 microcountertops. You describe your symptoms: periods of intense anxiety, a feeling of being detached from your body, unexplained pains, a choking sensation. The doctor does not mention your womb. He does not talk about your nerves being irritable. He does not ask about your childhood sexual fantasies. Instead, he listens, and he consults a book. That book is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM, the New Bible of Psychiatry. The goal of the DSM is to create a common language and a clear, objective set of criteria for diagnosing mental health conditions, moving away from the grand, improbable theories of the past. In the second edition of the DSM-DSM-DSM-II, published in 1968, your condition would likely be diagnosed as hysterical neurosis. Conversion type. The name is still there, a stubborn echo of the past. The conversion part is a direct nod to Freud, retaining the idea that psychological stress is being converted into a physical symptom. But the framework is changing. The focus is shifting from a presumed, hidden cause of frustrated uterus, a repressed memory, to a descriptive cluster of symptoms. This is a subtle but profound change. Medicine is becoming more humble. It's admitting that it may not know the ultimate why, but it can reliably identify and categorize the what. This shift is driven by several forces. One is the rise of psychopharmacology. The discovery of drugs that could effectively treat anxiety and depression showed that mental states had a clear chemical component, something that didn't fit neatly into the purely psychological model of psychoanalysis. Another force is the rise of the feminist movement. By the 1970s, feminist thinkers and health activists are launching a powerful critique of the medical establishment. They look at the history of hysteria and see it for what it is: a pseudoscientific tool used for centuries to dismiss women's suffering and enforce social control. They argue that hysteria is not a disease, but a label applied to women who are reacting rationally to the irrational pressures of a patriarchal society. They reclaim their bodies and their minds, refusing to be defined by these ancient, misogynistic diagnoses. A small but poignant detail from this era is the women's health collective movement. Groups of women started meeting to share their experiences with the medical system, educating themselves about their own bodies, and publishing their own health guides. Like the landmark book Our Bodies, Ourselves, it was a grassroots rebellion against the medical paternalism that had defined the treatment of women for millennia. The patient was no longer a passive recipient of a diagnosis, she was an active, informed participant in her own healthcare. The final act comes in 1980, with the publication of the DSM-III. This was a revolutionary edition of the manual, marking a decisive break with the psychoanalytic tradition. A committee of psychiatrists, determined to make their field more scientific and reliable, went through the book, diagnosis by diagnosis, and threw out anything that couldn't be defined by observable, objective criteria. And so, after a reign of nearly 500 years, the word hysteria is officially banished from the medical lexicon. It is deemed too vague, too pejorative, and too historically contaminated to be a useful clinical term. It is broken apart into a number of more precise and less judgmental diagnoses. Your conversion symptoms might now be called a conversion disorder. Your anxiety and palpitations might be diagnosed as panic disorder. Your general emotional volatility might be seen as a feature of a personality disorder. The great, sprawling empire of hysteria is dismantled, its territories carved up and renamed. The debate among historians and sociologists of medicine about this moment is rich. Was the removal of the word hysteria a true liberation, a final victory of science and social progress over ancient prejudice, or did it simply mask the same old problems under new, more clinical-sounding names? Some argue that while the label is gone, the underlying tendency to dismiss medically unexplained symptoms in women as psychosomatic or all in their head persists. The ghost of the wandering womb may have been exorcised from the textbooks, but does it still haunt the hallways of the clinic? For you, this moment is a quiet liberation. The word that has defined, confined, and tormented your historical sisters for millennia is finally gone. You are no longer a hysteric. You are a person with a specific, treatable condition. The weight of Plato, Galen, Chalkit, and Freud is lifted from your shoulders. Your suffering is finally detached from your gender. The long, strange journey is over. The word is dead. The word is dead, but its ghost lingers. We banished hysteria from the medical books. But have we truly banished the thinking that sustained it for so long? This is the echo of our long journey through history. The faint resonance that still hums in the background of modern life. The story doesn't just end in 1980, it leaves a legacy. A set of cultural habits and assumptions that are harder to erase than a word in a manual. Think about the language we use today, often casually. When a person, particularly a woman, is being emotional, they might be dismissed as hysterical. When a crowd gets overly excited, it's mass hysteria. The word, stripped of its clinical meaning, lives on as a colloquialism, and it still carries that faint, ancient scent of gendered, irrational emotion. It's a verbal fossil, a small reminder of the massive theoretical beast that once roamed the earth. But the echo is more than just linguistic. It's in the very real disparities that persist in medicine. Consider the ongoing issue of women's pain being taken less seriously than men's. Countless studies have shown that women often have to wait longer in emergency rooms to receive pain medication, and their reports of pain are more likely to be described in medical charts as emotional or anxious in origin. Is this not the faint, modern echo of a doctor dismissing a woman's suffering as a fit of the vapors? When a woman presents with complex, medically unexplained symptoms, the kind of symptoms that once would have earned her an instant diagnosis of hysteria, she is still more likely than a man to be told that it's just stress or all in her head. Conditions like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and irritable bowel syndrome, which disproportionately affect women and lack a clear, simple biological marker, have all, at some point, occupied that same uncomfortable space that hysteria once did, the borderline between real physical illness and psychosomatic complaint. Here we touch upon a fascinating ongoing debate in medical sociology and feminist theory. Has the core concept of hysteria simply been transdiagnostically reincarnated? Some scholars argue that while the name has changed, the fundamental dynamic has not. A certain type of suffering, diffuse, multi-symptomatic, and resistant to easy explanation when it occurs in a female body, is still at high risk of being psychologized. The problem is no longer located in her womb or her nerves, but in her stress levels or her emotional state. The location has moved, but the implicit blame and dismissal can feel hauntingly familiar. Let's look at a curious modern phenomenon, the world of wellness and alternative medicine. It's a world largely populated and consumed by women. And what does it offer? Remedies for stress, fatigue, hormonal imbalances, and vague feelings of being unwell. It often employs a holistic, intuitive language that stands in stark contrast to the often dismissive efficiency of mainstream medicine. Could the booming wellness industry be, in part, a response to this historical echo, a space where women feel their diffuse, hard to pin down health concerns are finally being heard and validated? Even if the scientific basis for the remedies is sometimes questionable, it's a complex question with no easy answer. The journey of Hysteria shows us how tightly medical facts can be interwoven with cultural beliefs for 500 years. The smartest minds in Western medicine looked at a woman's body and saw a ticking time bomb of emotion and instability. They weren't all malicious fools, they were intelligent people working within a flawed paradigm. Their observations filtered through the lens of their culture's assumptions about gender. Their theories served to uphold the social order, to provide scientific reasons for why things were the way they were. This is perhaps the most important lesson from our story. It's a cautionary tale about the danger of certainty, and about how easily science can be used to reinforce prejudice. It reminds us to ask critical questions about the medicine of our own time. What are our blind spots? What cultural assumptions are embedded in our current diagnoses that future generations will look back on with the same mixture of amusement and horror that we feel when we look at the wandering word? The echoes are there if you listen closely in our language, in our healthcare statistics, in the ongoing struggle for conditions that primarily affect women to be taken seriously, unfunded for research. The ancient Greek woman with the lump in her throat has not entirely vanished. Her experience, her struggle to be understood, resonates forward in time. A quiet reminder of the long, and not yet finished, journey to see and treat women not as a collection of potentially rebellious parts, but as whole people. And so, we bring it all the way back to you, not the you in ancient Greece or Victorian Paris, but you, right here, right now, lying in your bed. Let's come back to that first subtle feeling, that flutter in your chest, that lump in your throat, that wave of dizziness or anxiety. After this long journey through time, what do we see now? We see a constellation of possibilities, a universe of explanations that your historical sisters were denied. You can now take a deep breath, and instead of fearing that an internal organ has gone rogue, you can begin to ask different questions. Is this the familiar rush of adrenaline from a panic attack? A physiological response to stress that can be managed with therapy and breathing techniques? Could it be a sign of a thyroid issue? A simple hormonal imbalance that can be checked with a blood test? Perhaps it's a cardiac arrhythmia, something that can be monitored with an EKG and treated with modern medication. Or maybe it is, in fact, a complex reaction to stress, a physical manifestation of an emotional truth that needs to be heard and processed, not repressed and converted. The difference is staggering. It is the difference between a prison and a library. You are no longer locked into a single, bizarre, and blaming diagnosis. You have access to a library of knowledge: endocrinology, neurology, cardiology, psychology, gynecology, all of which see your body not as an inherently flawed system, but as a complex, interconnected one. When you touch your throat, you don't have to imagine your uterus pressing against your windpipe. You can understand the mechanism of the globus sensation, the way the muscles in your throat can tense up in response to anxiety, creating a very real feeling of a lump where nothing physical exists. You can understand it, name it, and by understanding it, begin to rob it of its terror. A small but profound detail of modern medicine that would seem like pure magic to your predecessors is the simple act of looking inside. With an ultrasound, a CT scan, an MRI, we can see what Vesalius could only see in death. We can see our uterus, snug and secure, held in place by its ligaments. We can see your heart, your brain, your lungs, the dark, mysterious inner space of the body, which for centuries was a blank canvas for fantastical theories, is now illuminated. The monsters have been banished because we turned on the lights. This journey through the history of hysteria is not just a tour of bizarre medical beliefs. It's the story of a slow, painful, and incomplete liberation. It's the story of how we learn it, and are still learning. To listen to women's bodies without judging them, to separate suffering from blame, and to replace myth with evidence. The academic world still picks apart this history. Of course, scholars continue to debate the exact relationship between culture and diagnosis, the legacy of Freud, the modern echoes of hysteria. Was it all a great historical mistake, or did the diagnosis, in its own strange way, give a name and a reality to a form of suffering that society otherwise would have ignored completely? It's a question without a simple answer, a testament to the complex, and often contradictory, role that medicine plays in human life. So now, as you lie there, feel the stillness and the quiet integrity of your own body. It is not a rebellious animal. It is not a source of toxic fumes. It is not a weak vessel prone to nervous fits. It is your home. It is the intricate, resilient, and wonderfully complex machine that is carrying you through this life. The strange sensations you may feel from time to time are not a sign of your fundamental flaw, but simply part of the human experience. Signals to be listened to with curiosity and compassion, not with fear and shame. You can finally exhale. The journey is over. You have traveled through 500 years of medical misunderstanding and emerged on the other side. You have reclaimed your body from the clutches of history. It is yours. It is whole. And it is, thankfully, staying right where it belongs. The story is over now. The long, strange trip through time has come to an end. Feel the weight of your own body, safe and still in your bed. There are no wandering parts, no toxic vapors, just the gentle, rhythmic rising and falling of your own breath. The voices of the ancient doctors have faded away, leaving only the soft hum of the fan, or the quiet of your room. Let the echoes of the story dissolve, like sugar in warm water, leaving behind only a sense of calm. All that history, all that drama, it's far away now. It's just a story, and now, the story is done. You are drifting, floating in that peaceful space between wake arsenals and sleep. The edges of your thoughts are becoming soft and blurry. The sharp lines of the day are smoothing out into gentle curves. Feel the warmth of your blanket, the softness of your pillow. Your mind, which has traveled so far tonight, can finally come to rest. It has done enough for one day. There is nothing left to figure out, nothing left to solve. There is only the quiet invitation of sleep. Let your breathing slow down. Each exhale a little longer, a little softer than the last. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are drifting, peacefully, into a deep and restorative sleep. The end of the article. Good night.